evening because of our discussion last week about interpretation. I think it's a really great, it's a great segue into what we're talking about this evening, which is perceived self-image. So Al's here to join us. Like I said, he's a brilliant practitioner in this. I myself have had several lessons by him. I love that terminology because it really is about helping the body interpretate the way it communicates. I would have to say that. The communication system within the body. That's my interpretation.
It's the nervous system, and the brain, and the whole somatic sensory system, how it all works together to facilitate easier movement and more comfort in movement. But it's a learning process. It's what we call a lesson.
Okay.
It's using the same principles of developmental movement that we used when we were children, infants, and we were learning to walk and crawl to improve ourselves now as adults.
Okay. Because, yeah, I mean, even after my last one, it didn't take long for me to actually sense.
And that was today, right?
Yeah. And integration.
Yeah.
I mean, it just in the mere walking back from the office was like, you could tell that the system was integrating.
Yes. Yes.
So that's very interesting to me. But like I said, what really caught my attention was that idea of perceived self-image. And I guess that's going to affect the way we carry ourselves. Would that be?
Well, yeah, it affects how we carry ourselves, how we move. Moshe would say, and he says in his book, Awareness Through Movement, he says in lectures, we move according to our self-image. And so, what is that? What is the self-image to which we move accordingly? And so I'm just put that out there as a question. So when you think of self-image, what is that? What do you think about it?
Like, you mean how I think of myself? How do I see myself?
Right.
Well, I guess I have done a lot of thought on this, and I don't want to go too crazy because I could talk for the rest of the, 43 minutes or 53 minutes that we have. The funny thing is, most people that know me would actually, I assume if I were to tell you what I think they would say about me, is that I'm pretty modest. My close friends would be like, haha, no, he's pretty braggadocious. But that's the truth, is in my head, I'm actually quite egotistical. I hate to say it, but it's not a bad thing. Because I don't try to portray myself that way. I don't try to be some rude person who just thinks all this and that about himself. But at the same time, when I was in school, I wasn't the most popular kid. And the funniest thing about it was, I was always wondering why. I was like, I'm so cool. I know I'm the coolest person here. Why don't you guys like me? And it was when I stopped caring about, after high school and everything, I stopped caring about what people thought of me. And that's when I started to become, quotation mark, cool. And I'm not cool to a lot of people, but my friends would say so. So that's, it's a weird self-image, but okay,
so let me just
I know you got weird there.
That's all right. No, let's put the pause button there and just review what you said. So the first thing you said was about how other people see you. Your friends would say this about you.
Right.
And then you described some of the characteristics about yourself from the past and now in the present. And so when you think about self-image, Tammy, what do you think about?
Well, that's how I perceive myself. And I mean, and for me, my self-image is tied into, unfortunately, what other people think of me. And it's all an interpretation, because nobody's come up and said anything that was derogatory, or I mean, I get compliments, but and then of course you get the derogatory, but for the most part, it's an assumed an assumed idea of what people think of me, and it's based on maybe things I was told when I was younger, and what I've noticed about myself, especially through the work that we've been doing, is how I've carried myself, which was always kind of hunched over, kind of like protecting my heart. Yeah.
So that's interesting too. So your idea about yourself is kind of imagining what other people think about you and taking that in.
Right.
And then that kind of creates this loop by which you shape yourself.
Right.
Right. So Moshe's idea about self-image is quite different from that.
Okay.
It brings into those ideas about society, about how other people, about culture and how that shapes us. In his book, Awareness Through Movement, he talks about the self-image primarily being that which is the map of ourselves we carry with us in the motor cortex and in the sensory motor cortex.
Oh.
And so if you were to pop the top of your brain off and poke around in there with an electrode, you'd find that in the motor cortex, that certain parts of you respond motorically. You poke here and your arm goes up, this kind of thing. And so, people who work with brains have been able to map that out. And so they have a map on the motor cortex and the sensory motor cortex of what the body looks like. And it looks like this. So if you're on Facebook, you can see this image. And you can see that it is not exactly like a human being. That there are parts of it that are much larger than others.
Oh, wow.
So, like you've got the face, the lips, the tongue, much exaggerated. The hands, the thumb, the feet are much larger than they are on us, of a person. Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of a generalization about ourselves that we carry with us in the motor cortex. And so this is a self-image. And actually, if you put this together in a humanoid form, it looks like this little guy right here.
Okay, that's weird.
He's got his hands are bigger than anything else on his body. His head is almost as big as his hands. His body is super tiny. His feet are kind of big. He has huge lips and a big tongue.
So this kind of self-image is, we all have one of these. But the thing is that it's always changing. Mm-hmm. And it's changing as we develop. So when we're infants and we're little children, infants especially, it's the lips and the tongue.
That's true.
That's the primary way by which we sense the world. We interact with our mother by that way. Mm-hmm. We are fed by that way. And as that starts to expand, then the hands, they start to develop, they become more of the self-image. And so you see eventually the hands and the lips and the tongue very large, and then the feet as well take up a lot of real estate in the cortex. So you'll find, though, that this is shaped also individualistically. So people who have expertise. So let's take somebody like Steve Vai, a great guitarist. In his motor cortex, in the sensory motor cortex, the finger is going to be represented much more in detail than, say, somebody who's never played an instrument or somebody who's never even learned to write.
Okay, I get that. That makes sense. So the fingers on this picture would be
even
huge.
bigger for Steve Vai. Right?
Right. Okay.
So, if this was my self-image, I would have like an enormous nose. But I see what you're saying. That makes a lot. And I don't know if nose is not in the motor.
It'd be a sensory cortex.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, look how big is it relative to the other sensory descriptions.
I see. It's not very big.
Yeah, so for you, though, it would be bigger because you've spent time developing your sense of smell, developing your olfactory sense.
Right.
That is, one of the domains of your expertise, is smelling things.
Yeah.
You were telling me today, earlier, that you studied with a professional nose.
I did.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. Very interesting, but
That's cool, man. You should be on the show every day. Or every Monday. We're not here every day. We wish we were. They don't pay us, though. You're not getting paid. You know that, right?
No, I didn't know that.
Oh, darn. I'll give you like $5.
So
I'll buy you a beer.
So Moshe, okay, you got a deal. So Moshe's idea, because I like beer. So Moshe's idea is that we can use movement and awareness and sensing to improve this image, to fill it out. So when we sense ourselves, we're primarily sensing through our fingers, through our face, primarily through the frontal part of ourselves. And other parts of ourselves they're really missing from our self-image. We don't sense them. A lot of us have difficulty with the back and the shoulder blades, right? We were talking about that, I believe, today or in a previous lesson. How those parts are really missing. And when they're missing, we don't feel them, we don't sense them, and then we don't interact with them.
no, it's kind of like, I was explaining to him, to me, it's like we are born into this body and it's just like this one big thing. We don't realize that there's such differentiation. And I've never realized for myself that what my back was for. It was just, it's just there. In fact, that's the reason why I was telling you just yesterday, I realized I needed to do some back body yoga, just something that was going to expand the back side of my body, because it just, you forget. And then even in those yoga classes, when I do my yoga sequencing, yeah. But oftentimes when I do yoga, and sometimes depending on the instructor, they'll even suggest potentially feeling like the side of your spine. And I've never felt, I mean, what do you mean by feeling the side of my spine? I mean, it's never there. It's just, this is what you present to the world. This is what you see, your hands, this is what's there. And so the back of the body has become particularly, it's improved. It has definitely improved. What I've noticed, truthfully, since getting the lessons from Al, I have actually been able to use my back more, even when I walk Mimi, because she's a strong dog.
I can see a big difference in the way you sit now from when I first met you.
Right.
When I first met you at that meeting we had with Jan at the Healing Art Studio, you sat very differently than you are sitting now. Now you're sitting in a very nice way, and your spine is supporting you very, very easily.
Yeah, but what's intriguing to me too is like I actually feel stronger, even though it hasn't.
And that's your skeleton supporting you.
That's incredible.
Yeah. But is that also maybe part of her self-image, of a level of confidence too?
It can bring out a level of confidence. So her change in her posture, her being able to sense and use her skeleton, and not in a conscious way, not saying that she has to do it consciously, but it happens automatically and it happens unconsciously, that her nervous system organizes around the skeletal system in order to support her with minimal muscular effort. And that becomes just second nature. So it's just there. She doesn't have to do this nonsense that we were taught as kids, pull your shoulders back, sit up straight, and all this crap. So it's absolutely unnecessary.
It's not on the list.
It's not on the list. You can say that.
Sorry.
Okay, good.
There's a list right there.
Should I read that out loud?
No. But just remember those, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's like 7 words.
I know.
There are so many more words that we're not allowed to say than
I
is on
learned
that
those
list.
7 words from...
Kindergarten?
No. Who was that great comedian?
Oh.
7 words you can never say on television. So it was hilarious. We had an album of his when we were kids, and we listened to it over and over again. So you don't have to do that. It becomes second nature, and she can now just sit like that easily and comfortably. So it's a reorganization of the nervous system, the cortices, and her musculature to be in service of the skeleton, which will support you easily and comfortably. And where we get into trouble is, so if we back up a little bit too, people telling you to support yourself and pull your shoulders back.
Yeah.
If you're actually successful at that, you will add more effort, and you'll layer on more muscular effort than you had before in order to try and correct that posture over another posture. And that just layers on more difficulty. So Moshe's idea is about development as adults, is to take away the layers, these learned layers that prevent us of being who we are, that prevent us from being really able to actualize our dreams and fulfill our full potential, our organic potential, as he would refer to it in his Awareness and Movement book.
I'm fascinated, truthfully, by the science of this. I can't deny that. And I think about how we are integrating the nervous system, and how is this actually affecting the way neurochemistry is being transmitted. Are there any studies on that? I know they're starting just now getting into yoga and meditation. I don't know if...
There's been a lot of studies done with the Feldenkrais method, but in terms of what is the neurochemistry
right.
of it, from that, we would look at studies that parallel what the Feldenkrais method does and kind of bring those in as a way to map over to how the Feldenkrais method is working.
Right.
So neuroplasticity plays a lot in it. And so, we know that the motor cortex and the sensory motor cortex can always be changing depending on what you're doing.
Absolutely. It's actually going on until the day that we die.
Yeah. So there's this plasticity in that. Mm-hmm. And so we can shape our motor cortex and our sensory motor cortex based on what we're doing. And the Feldenkrais method does that. Mm-hmm. And it does it in a way very generally, mm-hmm. by going through lots of different lessons, say like in a class situation. going through lots of different lessons and different ways of moving and bringing awareness into it and sensing yourself. And by that, we start to change how we represent ourselves.
Okay.
And that changes how we feel, and that changes how we move, and that changes how we are perceived by other people, and we get that feedback from other people, and we start to act differently and think differently about ourselves and feel differently about ourselves. Mm-hmm. So there's this kind of loop. We kind of bring that back into what you guys are talking about in the beginning. And that begins to shape how we further reinforce how we sit, how we stand. Mm-hmm. And it all begins in, it can all begin in a Feldenkrais class or a Feldenkrais private lesson, mm-hmm. like you've experienced. Mm-hmm. And those are actually more, I would say, probably more potent than a private lesson, mm-hmm. because it's really tailored to you as an individual.
Right.
So when I work with you in that setting, I'm working with your habits and your sensory system, and I'm sensing you and interacting with you in a way that's very precise and very unique to you. In a class, I'm giving verbal instructions to everybody, and I'm bringing everybody along in a certain sequence of movements, combine that with awareness and sensing and thinking and feeling in those lessons. Yeah. And it starts to reshape all that.
I have to say, I had a lesson last week where I was getting, I think I may have told you the numbing, when I lay on each side, mm-hmm. one treatment or one lesson, and it stopped. And I didn't have to think about it. It was amazing. Okay, we are back. So when we were talking about earlier about our perceived self-image, mm-hmm. Which is obviously different than what Moshe was actually talking about. How does that factor into kind of what we're talking about? It's like we were saying, can you?
Yeah. So let's go back to say like what happens in a Feldenkrais lesson. Mm-hmm. So how does that help to complete our self-image? We start to fill out more of our self-image, start to feel ourselves more completely, like you experienced in the lesson, feeling mm-hmm. your spine, and now sitting differently and mm-hmm. sitting solidly and having skeletal support with minimal muscular effort. And so when you guys were talking earlier at the very beginning, we're talking about how we see ourselves through the eyes of other people, what we think other people are, or how we think other people are seeing us. But if we make these changes from the inside, so you start to sit, stand, walk, and feel differently, people start to respond to you differently.
Exactly.
And that creates this kind of feed-forward system. So they see you sitting the way you're sitting now, and they have a different reaction to you than they would have, say, 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Right. I know for me, I always, we all have our stuff. And so for me, like even today, there was a distinct difference between when we worked on the right side of the body first, and then we went to the left side. There was a break in between, yes. where you just kind of experienced what it felt like. And even a couple lessons back, one of the experiences I have is like I almost lost like 50 pounds. I mean, I just felt like I lost all this weight because all of a sudden I felt like my body was supporting itself with little to no effort. And then today, it was a distinct difference where even though I was lying on a table, the left side of my body actually felt dense, as I think is the word I use, it felt really dense, where this side, actually, my right side actually felt supported. It was lighter, and I mean, but my whole body was on the table. And when I think back on my own personal self-image, it makes sense, because when you have such a poor self-image, you're going to feel heavier. There's a lot of weight. You're carrying a lot of weight, heaviness and so forth, emotionally and thought-wise. And so it would seem to weigh heavily on the body, and then again also alter the way we're moving.
Yes. One of the things that Moshe says about, and I agree with him on this, is that our posture is shaped by our emotions.
Okay.
And it's the emotions we have of ourselves that we carry through time. Mm-hmm. So we all have an emotional body, so to speak. Right. That way we feel that we carry through time. That shapes our posture. And for some people, it shapes them in this kind of rounded way. So if there's kind of a depressed or sad feeling, you're going to see this kind of roundedness. And it shapes people in all kinds of different ways. Mm-hmm. So the muscles are an expression of the emotions. They create the sensation of feeling. Mm-hmm. And that emotion that we carry with us through time is something we're less aware of. We carry that through time, and it shapes our posture, shapes our skeleton, and it also creates certain patterns of muscular tension. And so that limits our range of motion in certain ways and allows for movements in other ways. And that's where sometimes people get in trouble. If they got habitually contracted muscular tensions, then and something happens where they need to respond quickly, and it's not within the domain of known movements, then you can get an injury. That's where people get a strain, or they trip and fall, or something else happens.
So that brings me up to the talk we were having earlier about how we were talking about right side, dominant and passive side of the body. You know, like if the right side of the body is the dominant. I'd like if you would say more about that.
I guess maybe we start with like the idea of symmetry. So
Right.
a lot of people are obsessed with symmetry, and they think they should be symmetrical in the way their skeleton is organized, and the way they sit and stand and move, and then everything should be just perfectly balanced. And that's kind of an ideal we have that goes along with beauty, right? So a beautiful face is considered one that it is more symmetrical than one that is asymmetrical. And so people generalize that to their entire body, and it's just really inaccurate because there's nothing we do about our movement that is symmetrical. We have a dominant hand, a dominant arm, we have a dominant eye, a dominant ear, we chew on one side of the mouth more than the other. You're telling me we smell more with the right nostril than the left.
That's right.
We have asymmetrical use of the lungs. The right lung has 3 lobes and is much larger and has more depth to it than the left, which has 2 lobes. We tend to stand on one leg more than the other, and we tend to use the other leg for doing things like kicking a ball, or the gesture leg in Feldenkrais Method. So there's all these asymmetrical uses of ourselves. And so it would be silly to think that we should be perfectly symmetrical in the way we stand, move, or sit. So the thing is, how do we inform our habits so that we have the freedom to move in any way we want to with ease and comfort? In a way, that's Moshe's definition of posture, is that you can move in any direction you want without preparation. You can respond to any situation without preparation. That is good posture. It's not pulling your shoulders back and sitting up properly. And that's great if you're doing a tryout for Downton Abbey or some other British show. But in real life, it limits your ability.
I like that, and actually that makes a lot of sense because it's about being in your body. It's just about being aware of your body. And then that's one of the things that you point out when you do your lessons is that you do talk about, you do bring awareness to what's going on. Pay attention to this, pay attention to that. And what I've discovered is that level of awareness, which is right here, and it's your center, it's your core. It doesn't make any difference if you're standing on your right leg. You know, let's give an example. If I'm going with Mimi and she pulls, if as long as I'm right here and I'm really present to where my body is and how my back is, and I can actually, I don't even strong arm her. It's not even a wrestling match at that point. It's just a matter of, I have it. I got this, and I don't have to exert a lot of force, so to speak, to get her to do more of what I sound like I'm in control, and this is not about being in control, but actually to get her to respond more effectively with me.
I think it's a great point that you make, that that powerful movement comes from the center, so to speak, or from the largest muscles in the group, the largest skeletal parts, which is the pelvis and the hip joints. Those are where the largest muscles are. So if movement originates from there and then disseminates out to the more distal parts, it can be better organized and it's more powerful. So the powerful movement starts in our center, so to speak. The tanden, if you're looking at a martial arts orientation, or if you're looking at the skeletal parts, it's the pelvis and the hip joints and the lower back area. And so this movement comes powerfully from there, and then it's disseminated out. Then the more distal parts, the more distal muscles can refine it and articulate it into something that is much more graceful.
And I've actually noticed that. I don't feel so clumsy.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't feel so clumsy any longer because it feels like, even in yoga, I think it's the Manipura chakra, which is your solar plexus. That's where your power center is. But if you can actually harness that, the rest of it just kind of flows, and then there is a grace to it.
Yes.
But I've noticed since I've been practicing yoga for well over 10 years consistently, but the inclusion of the Feldenkrais has actually made a significant difference on being able to translate that information to my extremities.
Yes, I think that's a really good point you bring up is like, what are Feldenkrais lessons good for? Mm-hmm. It's like whatever you do in life, if you love yoga, it will improve your yoga. Mm-hmm. If you're a martial artist, you do Tai Chi or Pilates, it will improve your Tai Chi, it will improve your Pilates. If you are a construction worker, if you build things, it will improve your ability to build. If you are a chef, it will increase your ability to be a chef in easy and comfortable ways. If you are an artist, if you make jewelry, if you do any of these things and you do Feldenkrais lessons, it helps you to do them better. It is like it frees you from the habitual constraints of your development and brings you back to yourself in a way that is truly organic, that you can truly express yourself. And in a town full of artists, I can't think of anything more important.
Yeah.
And that is my art, is bringing that forward for people.
Mm-hmm. No, and you're very good at it. Like I said, I've met a number of practitioners, Feldenkrais practitioners over the years, but when you and I spoke that one day, I knew I wanted to bring you on because your understanding of it and your ability to communicate that is it's very profound. It really makes a big difference because it helps. I mean, if you're just there, I realize the body, the great thing is the body is incredibly smart. You don't have to tell it. It's not we have to be talking to ourselves and telling it, well, you need to do, what finger needs to do what, or there's an integration that occurs that is beyond description, but at the same time, you help incorporate that into the mental part of the body, because that's an important. There's these systems have to work together. We're constructed mentally, emotionally, physically, and so and chemically too, and so having these systems function as a unit, that's what I think that you actually bring in. What I've learned from you.
I agree with that. And I would also say that I don't work with everybody in that way.
Okay.
There may be people I give lessons to, and there's very little discussion, very little talk in the lesson. Mm-hmm. And for you, that lesson is for you. Mm-hmm. And so you asked for that.
Right.
You asked for that
I'm the
experience.
kind of girl.
Yeah. And so that became part of the lesson. And I used my language and my ability to guide your thoughts and your sensory experience in ways that really took the lesson to, I believe, a whole different level for you.
It absolutely did. And like I said, I happen to be that I'm always asking questions, so it's been very, well, then my lessons have been perfect, so.
Yeah. So some people come in and their issue is my back hurts or my hip hurts, and they just want to get that resolved. Mm-hmm. That's it. And that's fine. And I work with people like that as well, and I help them resolve those issues and help them get back out and on with their lives so they can do what they want to do.
Well, I find it's an interesting healing technique, because basically, in my perspective, is nothing heals the body but the body itself. And so what I can see with Feldenkrais is it actually does encourage the body to, again, function as a whole system. So there's definitely it is definitely holistic.
Oh, definitely.
And at the same time, it's encouraging the body to begin to heal, and it does break down the layers. Well, it's, and it all comes down to our different perspectives. And for me, I am absolutely fascinated by the way nature in itself communicates. Again, I realize that we have the distinct use of our words, but again, there's things that are occurring, and to me, there's always more than what we just see, I guess is what I'm saying. And so even in Moshe's case, even if we're just going for structural, if I were to show up and say, hey, look, I got this neck pain, there's going to be more to it. And
much more.
And we don't have to necessarily label it, I guess.
Well, and if you came in to me and just said, Allie, my neck hurts, can you help me with this? It would be, and you say you were a different person, mm-hmm. It'd be a very different kind of lesson.
Right.
And I would help you with that. But I would not just work with your neck, I'd work with you as a whole person. I would work with you to create a systemic change so that your whole organization would improve and your wellness would improve overall, and then the neck pain starts to resolve. So create the conditions for that neck pain to resolve, and then when I did work with it directly, it's ready to receive that, and it's ready to learn and change.
That's great. That's really great. I really appreciate you joining us tonight.
It was a blast. I love talking about the Feldenkrais method, and I can do this for hours on end.
Yeah. Finish this up by saying I find it very intriguing how that there's so many, not a lot, but there's different techniques that have been developed around the world with a lot of the same kind of thought processes, but based on somebody's own life experiences. And so even though they may never even met one another, these things have evolved, and whoever can align with what, and I truly align with Feldenkrais, there's no question about it. So, but I just find it very interesting that these people just popped up on the planet to help others really figure out a better way of existing in all manner, physically, mentally, emotionally, and socially, truthfully, because if you're carrying yourself in a way that is not offensive and it's, it's, mindful, I guess is what I want to say, because that's the word that matters to me.
And it's a good word. I like that word.
Well, I'm going to say thank you again.
Well, thank you. It was awesome.
Yes, it was very much enjoyable.